Hello again, and welcome back to the amazing world of Nick Majors. Well, it's been a pretty incredible week. This past weekend, I posted an AMA, Ask Me Anything, to my Reddit account, and the response was really phenomenal. I got well over 8 million views, 12,000 comments from people, thousands and thousands of questions, and I've been busy answering them and meeting up new people and them getting to know me and me getting to know them. One of the things that came up is that a lot of people don't fully understand the chronology or order of the events in my life. Well, I've done an awful lot of things. It's pretty hard to follow when I was doing what. So I put this together to give you a quick overview of my life by the decade through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, to give you a better idea of who I am and where I came from. So let's get going. I was born in the 1950s, 1954 in Toronto, Canada, a European family. My dad was Hungarian and my mother was Austrian. Had 3 sisters, 2 older, 1 younger. Normal enough family. My name at birth was Nicholas Moldovanyi, not Nick Majors. As the years went on, I moved into business. I adopted the name Nick Majors. Just easier to pronounce, easier to spell. A bit more anglicized, so I took that on and basically used that in business for a number of years. Legally, you're allowed to use any name you want to, so long as it's not for criminal or fraudulent purposes. So I operated for years as Nick Majors. I didn't really have an issue with that. I didn't officially change my name until 2005, about 6 months before I sold the business, at which time I formally had it changed to Miklos Nick Majors. The Miklos was a nod to my heritage because of my dad's Hungarian background. And I've been Nick Majors ever since. Changing the name actually had nothing whatsoever to do with my dark past, so to speak. I always thought of myself as largely a child of the 60s. It was a great time to be a teenager. Free love, drugs, marijuana, pot was around. Unfortunately, we also had the war in Vietnam, but that spurred the peace movement. It was a pretty exciting time. Musically, we had rock and roll, the British Invasion, the Beatles. It was fantastic. As a teenager, I also spent quite a lot of time studying judo. I was a member of the Hitachta Dojo in Toronto, and I'm pretty proud to say that I was a member of what was arguably the best teenage judo team in North America at the time. It was a good time, had some wonderful friendships, many people I still know to this day. It was a very important part of my life. I went on later in life in high school to be an amateur wrestler, largely based on my judo skills, and actually ended up at age 40 because of my nephew starting karate, and ended up over a 5-year period then earning a black belt in karate. So I've done martial arts reasonably extensively in my life. Then into the 70s, I dropped out of high school just a few months before graduation, so I never did get that diploma. My best friend Peter and I and a third guy called Veggie, don't know where he is today, headed off and bought ourselves an old Volkswagen and headed out west and up north with the dream of making ourselves our fortune. We believed at the time if you got a job up north in the mines, you could, work for a few months or a couple of years, make a fortune and be set for life. Ha, ha, ha. Found ourselves in the Pas, Manitoba, north of Winnipeg. Peter and I registered in the community college course to learn to operate heavy equipment. We left Veggie in Winnipeg working in a peanut butter factory. No idea whatever happened to him. I supported myself on the side by driving cab for a company called Cal's Cabs, and we spent a fascinating few summer months up there in the Pas. Peter ended up getting injured working with some heavy equipment. I ended up sticking my thumb out and hitchhiking further west into Canada. Found myself eventually in Edmonton, and from there I got a job in Port Radium, Northwest Territories with Echo Bay Mines. It was billed as Canada's most northerly producing mine, with a claim to fame that apparently the uranium that was used for the atomic bomb that ended the Second World War had come from Port Radium. Wrapped that up in 1972 and headed back to Toronto. In order to keep my parents happy, I decided to get a straight job. Ended up getting a job with a company called National Trust It was a banking company, and I found myself in the accounting department dealing with pensions and RSPs. This was also the time when I discovered and largely accepted the politics of the libertarian philosophy, of the libertarian movement. This was largely through the works of Ayn Rand, who I'm sure a lot of you have got mixed feelings about. But I was hooked, ended up quite active in the Libertarian Party of Canada, and actually ended up being their leader. Ran for Parliament as a fringe candidate and got the appropriate very few number of votes. But I was active. Moved back out to Vancouver in Western Canada, and together with Mike Little, who you'll hear a lot more about later, I was involved in a tax limitation movement, a pro-freedom, pro-individual rights, small government, lower taxes, political organization. That surprises a lot of people who think of me these days as a left-leaning liberal, which I'm not. But that period of time and those people had a pretty big impact on my philosophy and my opinion and thoughts about drug laws and the war on drugs and things like that, which obviously came into play as my life went on and played out. Also, during that time in the 1970s, I was introduced to the world of IT and microcomputers, which were all pretty new at the time. I ended up getting myself an Apple computer and a Radio Shack TRS-80, started exploring and taught myself how to program computers. Surprisingly, I had a real knack and natural ability at computer programming and math, and this was unknown to me at any time before that. And then come the 1980s. That's when a 30-something-year-old Nick really started to get into adventures and troubles that would have huge impact on his life and his world forevermore.
Rolling up his dash like Knuckles. Eastside, who's almost? I'm gone. Rolling up his dash like Knuckles. G-Bags, Pablo. In the studio with my man Carlos. Anybody ask, I'm off to Lagos.
This is when an unassuming young man from Toronto suddenly finds himself in South America, in Colombia, as a known associate of Pablo Escobar in the Medellín Cartel, ends up spending 13 months in the U.S. federal prison, has indictments against him, including an arrest warrant that stayed with him for the next 25 years, basically threatening him with 25 years to life on multiple counts. How did that happen? What's that all about? And how the heck did you ever get there? And how'd you ever get out? I don't think anything surprises people more than when they learn or realize that I have a criminal past, that I was involved in drug smuggling, cocaine trafficking, Pablo Escobar, the Medellín Cartel. Heck, most people don't even know that I ever was a pilot. And there's a reason for that, because when that chapter of my life closed, I didn't talk about it. I went ahead and built up my business, lived as a respectable businessman. Heck, I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. I got pictures of me with the mayor of Toronto, with the premier, like a governor of Ontario or province, won many Entrepreneur of the Year awards. I didn't talk about it until December 2023, when I went public with it. So why now, after all these years? Well, come on, I'm 70 years old. First of all, I think I've got a story to tell. A story that's different than what you've heard from other pilots like George Jung or Barry Seal or some of the others who've written books and had movies made about their times. Also, I'm no longer concerned with getting a job or building a career. I'm not worried about being judged by other people anymore. And I don't think there's very much the U.S. government can take away from me. I haven't got much to lose. Here I am, and all secrets are revealed, fully transparent. It all started with a very good friend of mine, Mike Little. Mike was a really accomplished pilot. He'd flown as a commercial pilot with Air Canada, was trained by the Canadian Armed Forces as a fighter pilot, and I'd met him through the libertarian movement. We got to know each other very well, trusted each other, and just bonded. He was one of the mentors of my life. We haven't seen Mike in a couple of years, and he showed up unannounced at my home in Thornhill one day. We spent a few days together. He seemed to have a ton of money, and he explained to me what he was involved in. He was smuggling drugs out of Bolivia into the Caribbean through a contact he'd had from Air Canada many, many years back. And he basically asked me if I was willing or if I wanted to be his co-pilot. And I said, come on, Mike, I've never flown a plane in my life. And he looked at me and he said, Nick, I'm a pilot. I don't need you to fly the plane. What I do need is a navigator and someone I can trust. So I thought about it, probably for about a half day, and just basically said, yeah, sure. Where to now? Mike headed off again, said he'd be in touch shortly, left me a couple of $1,000, and I started taking flying lessons in Canada at the Brampton Flying Club. Figured at least knowing how to fly a plane, knowing about planes would help. So, in 1984, I headed down to Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and started working with Mike. We had a pretty comfortable life down there. We spent our days studying Spanish together and teaching ourselves the language. In the evenings, we were carousing through the nightclubs and discos in Santa Cruz. Every few weeks, we'd run a trip. We actually worked for a couple of different people. Most of the trips were from northern Bolivia to St. Martin's in the Caribbean. Every time we did a trip, I got $50,000. Mike made himself $100,000. So things were pretty comfortable and pretty nice for us at the time. Mike was living with one of the bosses in his home, and I was living in a hotel. We ended up making a deal with Harold, one of our main sources of business in Bolivia, to buy and refurbish a Grumman Albatross flying boat. That was an airplane, an amphibious airplane. And we suggested to him that with that, we could fly bigger loads into the Caribbean and into the Bahamas, and we could have our choice of offload locations. And if need be, we could change them on very short notice. So he thought it was a great idea, and Mike and I then spent pretty much the next 2 years working on putting that plane together. We spent time in Great Britain, Spain, Ireland, Iceland, and a large part of it in Guernsey and the Channel Islands, which is where we actually had most of the refurbishing and the work on the airplane done. So when the Albatross was finally ready to go in 1986, Mike and I had to fly it to a jungle airstrip in just outside of Caucasia, Colombia. All went well. We got the plane there, landed. People were walking around, touring the plane, all excited about it. And as we were having dinner about an hour later, the Colombian Air Force raided that airstrip. Helicopters coming in all directions, troops hopping off the helicopters with guns and rifles. Mike and I just fled into the jungle. We ended up spending 4 days in the jungle, basically hiding from helicopters and troops, until finally we were rescued by the people who we found out were our employers, the people who had bought the airplane, our customers. So we ended up being taken, and surprisingly taken to Medellín. And it was then when we got there that we found out that the person who we were dealing with was actually Roberto Escobar. Harold, our contact, had actually gone to Medellín and gotten members of the cartel to finance this project for him. And we didn't even know we were working for them. Suddenly there we are in Medellín, and we're with the cartel. So it's intermission time. Now, if you enjoy this video, then please, by all means, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, take the link and share it with people. The only way that I can be sure to create new content and more content like this is with a growing subscriber base. Also, if any of you are particularly interested in the time I spent with the Medellín cartel, I have a second YouTube site, which is called Ghosts of the Cartel. Please feel free to pop over there, have a look, and subscribe there as well. There's a lot more in-depth detail about the things I did with the Colombians. Thanks a lot, and we'll move on from here, and thank you so much. By the way, please watch this video till the end. It's important. If you hang on till the end, I promise I've got a special inspirational message for people then. So have a great day, and let's move on. So that's how I came to be with and work with the Medellín cartel. Now, Mike had to go back to Miami a few days later because he had some passport issues to deal with. I was asked if I wanted to stay, and I said sure. So I then spent the next 2 or 3 months living in Medellín in the home of Roberto Escobar, going every day to La Oficina, the cartel headquarters, participating in all their social and a lot of other activities, taking off on weekends to fincas or country homes. It's quite an experience. Met many, many members of the Escobar family, all kinds of drug lords from Carlos later to who knows who. Anyway, it all went on and worked quite well until finally my arrest in December of 1987. I ended up spending 13 months in federal prison under pretrial detention. And once I got released, I came back to Canada, and I've never been back to South America since then. Now, I stayed in touch with Roberto Escobar and other members of the cartel and did a few projects for them remotely as an advisor and a expediter, but never again flew for them and never again went back down there. So the 1990s found me back in Canada again, pretty much broke and at the bottom, having to start all over again. I'd accumulated some assets and money, but most of that was with people who were now either dead or in prison for long-term sentences, so I didn't have anything left. Maintained a relationship with the cartel through Roberto Escobar, but by 91, pretty much everyone that I knew went and turned themselves into La Catedral, which they escaped from a year later. And as most of us know, in 1993, Pablo Escobar was killed. And that's kind of the end of the story of that part of my life. Back in Canada, what am I going to do? I went back to working with computers. I had a friend of mine, Paul, who invited me to work with him as a computer service company. And Paul was a really interesting person I could best describe as a madman math professor. Your Doc from Back to the Future. So Paul and I were working away, providing computers, building computers, and managing computers for a number of corporate clients that he had. And along the way, he started to teach me about programming in ways I'd never seen before. He started teaching me machine code and assembly language, basically microcomputers at the processor chip level. I learned that well enough that when Paul wanted to step aside, he asked me if I wanted to continue teaching a course he had developed and was offering through a private college. It was called Microcomputer Processors for the Technically Advanced. With some hesitation, I took to it, but the courses went well. I was teaching them, and great work. I was being paid up to $1,000 a day to teach microcomputer processors, command sets, command structures to techies from government agencies, private corporations. It was great. Problem with it was there were only so many courses a year they offered. So while you are making $1,000 a day, you could only work 20, 30, 40 days a year at the most. And it's great money when you can get it, but it wasn't enough to really build your life and build your career on and move forward. So I started looking for other things to do. So this really was the birth of my data recovery business. I started researching and exploring hard disk drive controllers and found various methods to access the data a sector at a time through the PC BIOS using something called an interrupt 13. That basically allows you to bypass software and get directly to the information. And it really was the core of all data recovery efforts. I ended up publishing a couple of booklets after we published the original booklet in 1993 and updated it in 1995. And gained quite a bit of recognition in the PC tech world as a technician who knew how hard disk drives work. As my professor friend moved on to other interests in his life, mostly cryonics and the long life movement, I started building a data recovery company. And like everything in my life, I did it my way. I started with, just myself, up with 3 employees, then 5, then 10, then 20. Ended up opening branches throughout the U.S., opened one up in Europe as well. And that's the company that ended up selling to Seagate for $14 million in 2005. At its peak, we were doing $10 million a year in business, up to $1 million a month in data recovery. Had a tremendous staff, really hired only the best, paid them well, and treated them well. Surprisingly, for a high-tech company in the 1990s, we had virtually a 0 turnover rate. The secret to it all was convincing my employees that their future was best served by our company succeeding. And it did. And thank you so much for watching this video. Before I wrap things up, I want to just take a few minutes and have a word one-on-one with some of you and talk a little bit about what I'm doing here and what I hope you're getting out of it. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge something that is important. We all have problems in life. We all have challenges. We all have things that are going wrong, and we're looking for answers and solutions. Unfortunately, I know that there are some people in this world who have things much worse than we do. There are people out there who are dying of diseases, who have pain that's just unimaginable, who just had a child or a close family member pass away or is on the verge of passing away. People who live in the Gaza Strip, people who live in the Ukraine, people who have such abject poverty, they literally can't have any food on the table, and they're afraid for their future. They don't know what to do. I have nothing for those people. I can't help them. I can't save their life. I can't do anything. All I can do is send them all my best with a sincere hope that they find a way to survive, and to tell them I do believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think you'll get there. Please look after yourself, and please do what you can to get there. This video content I'm making for other people, for the rest of us, those who face the daily challenges that just set us back and keep us from living our life to its full potential. I'm making these videos and this content for you, trying to share some wisdom, some ideas, some thoughts, inspiration, motivation, sharing the experience that I've had in my life, showing you that there's always different routes you can take, and maybe it'll catch, maybe it'll mean something to you. I hope it does. Look, I'm not asking you for anything. Oh, yeah, I do want you to subscribe to this channel. And if you get a chance, go to Ghostless Cartel and subscribe there too. But I'm not one of the fake gurus out there. I don't have a course to offer you. I don't want you to send me money. I don't want you to come to a meeting. I just want you to think about what you're doing, listen to things I have to suggest and say, maybe take a different perspective on life. If you do, I promise you'll be able to change your life. Because I can't do that for you. Only you can change your life. But I'm here, and I'm glad to give you anything I can in thoughts and ideas and inspiration. And I just hope you go ahead, have yourself a great weekend. And once again, thanks for being here, and please come back. I'm going to be running a number of live sessions starting next week. I'm just going to come on and give you a chance to ask me questions. So let's see where that goes to.